Hello, dear students of class 9. Once again, we meet after a short summer break, and it's time once again to take up The Merchant of Venice. And we have already finished with Act 1, Scene 2. So today we are going to begin with Act 1, Scene 3. So please take out your textbooks and get ready for today's class. So here we go, students, once again with The Merchant of Venice, and today we are going to take up Act 1, Scene 3, and let us see what we have in the introduction of Act 1, Scene 3. In this scene, Shylock, the Jewish moneylender, is introduced. So we get introduced to Shylock. He is a major character in this play and is part of the main plot of the play. That is, the main story of the play revolves around Antonio, Bassanio, and Shylock, and also Antonio's friends. So Shylock is a Jewish man, and in those days in Venice, money lending business was a business done by the Jews, not by Christians, because lending money and then charging interest was against Christian religion, and that's the reason why this was the only trade or only profession in which the Jews engaged themselves. They were foreigners, actually from Israel, and they had settled in Italy, in Venice, and since Venice in those days was an important port of call for ships from different parts of the world and a very important business center. So that being the reason, money lending was also essential, because in those days there were no banks and people had to depend, especially the businessmen and also sometimes the ordinary people, had to depend largely on money lenders whenever they were in need of cash. So this business was basically done by the Jews, and Shylock is a Jewish money lender, and we are going to meet him for the first time in this play, Act 1, Scene 3. Remember, we meet Shylock, we get introduced to Shylock in Act 1, Scene 3 of this play. Now let's see what else is there in this scene. We come to know that he is the most powerful dramatic figure in the play. Shylock's hatred for Antonio intensifies the drama. Now, Shylock hated Antonio. Now, all in all, we have seen in the opening scene, Antonio has many friends, and all his friends are concerned about Antonio's anxiety, Antonio's depression, and they are all trying to cheer him up. And it seems that Antonio is quite popular among his friends. But then this Antonio, the one who seems to be very mild and very gentle, this Antonio happens to be the worst enemy of Shylock. Shylock, the Jew. The reason is not far to seek. Antonio, being a Christian, hated the Jews and particularly Shylock. And many a times, Antonio had publicly insulted Shylock in the open market, in front of the other merchants and traders. Antonio had gone to the extent of spitting on Shylock's dress and criticizing his religion and calling him a cutthroat dog, and mocked his nationality, and had said whatever negative things he could about Shylock. And Shylock had to bear all these insults because he was a foreigner and he was living among the Christians, and he was a religious minority, and there were not many like him who could stand up and support him. And that's the reason why Shylock had to tolerate all these insults of Antonio from time to time. And that's the reason why Shylock hates Antonio. He hates Christians, and particularly among all the Christians, he hates Antonio. This is one reason why he hates Antonio, but there are some more reasons. By and by, as we read the text of the play, we shall come to know. So Antonio is hated by Shylock, and then, having been ridiculed by Antonio for years, he does not want to lend money to his friend Bassanio. But foreseeing, that is, he can foresee or see ahead. He can imagine or he can see the future, and he's thinking about that future. See in the sense, well, he can imagine that if he lends the money to Antonio for Bassanio, then if Antonio is unable to pay back after the time gets over, he can definitely ask for some kind of penalty. And that is the evil plan which Shylock makes at this stage. Initially refuses to give the money. Initially he sort of tries to avoid the question of the borrowing when Bassanio approaches him. But eventually he hits upon the idea of preparing a document of agreement or a bond in which he decides to put down the condition that if Antonio could not return the money within 3 months, then after the completion of the third month, Shylock would be able to ask for a penalty, and this penalty was nothing but a pound of Antonio's flesh, which he would cut off from any part of Antonio's body that he wishes. So if Antonio agrees to that, he is ready to disburse the amount which Bassanio needs. As we already know, we have already read about it in Act 1, Scene 1. Bassanio needs money to go to Belmont, where he wants to try his luck in winning Portia's heart and marry Portia. But for that he needs money, and he approaches Antonio in Act 1, Scene 1. Antonio says, my business ventures are all out in the sea, and I have invested much amount in them, so I may not have that much of an amount which should be required by you if you want to go to Belmont in style. So why don't you go to the market and see if any money lender is ready to give you the cash. Now everybody knows that Bassanio doesn't do any work. He is a vain young man. Though he is educated, he is a soldier, as we know, already mentioned by Portia and Nerissa. A scholar, a soldier. In Act 1, Scene 2, we have seen that's how he's being described. Though he has all these qualities, but he doesn't do any work. And so any money lender would think twice before giving money to someone who doesn't do anything. Because once you give the money, there may not be any recovery. So Antonio also knows that, and that's why he had told Bassanio that when you find someone ready to give you the money, make sure that you mention that I will be the guarantor. I will stand as surety, and then you will easily get the money. Because Antonio is the richest merchant in Venice, and he is often termed as the royal merchant. We shall see eventually that even the Duke of Venice, that is the King of Venice, is also full of respect for wealthy Antonio. So that being the case, Antonio is sufficient enough as a guarantor for Shylock to give the money to Bassanio, but the bond has to be signed between Antonio and Shylock, not Bassanio. Antonio is actual borrower. He is borrowing the money, and he is signing that agreement or that bond, and then he is giving the money to Bassanio. So this is what is going to happen. But before it happens, let's see what happens in this scene. So, but foreseeing an opportunity to take his revenge on Antonio, he agrees to give the loan on a bond which would allow Shylock to cut off a pound of Antonio's flesh if he fails to repay the loan in time. The bond story is the main plot around which all action in the play takes place. So please remember that this bond story is the main plot of the play. The play is named after Antonio. The Merchant of Venice is none other but Antonio himself, and then his borrowing from Shylock and the signing of the bond. Everything now happens in relation to this bond which Antonio signs. So this bond is very important. It's the main plot of the story, and this bond story will reach its climax in Act 4, Scene 1 of this play, which is a portion you all will be doing when you reach class 10. So as of now, let's see the borrowing part. Scene 3. Scene 3, Venice. A public place. Enter Bassanio and Shylock. Shylock and Bassanio. Bassanio has found Shylock. A public place. That means could be a street. They are just walking along the street, and Bassanio has just found Shylock, and he has probably spoken to Shylock about the money that he requires, and he has also probably said that Antonio will be the guarantor. So the conversation continues from there on. So let's see what they are saying. Shylock says, 3,000 ducats. Well, oh, so you want 3,000 ducats. Ducats was monetary unit or currency unit of Venice in those times. So just as we have the Indian rupee, in the US they call it the US dollar. Similarly, in Venice it was known as ducats. Not now anymore, but in those days. So 3,000 ducats. Did you say you require 3,000 ducats? Well, says Shylock. Bassanio says, A, sir, for 3 months. A means yes. Yes, sir. And I need this money for a period of 3 months. So I want to borrow this amount for 3 months, and after 3 months I'll pay you back. Shylock says, for 3 months. Well, just see how Shylock is simply not coming to the point, and he's just repeating whatever Bassanio is saying. So he's saying, okay, so you want it for 3 months. Well, that's very good. That's very good. Well means that's good. You need it for 3 months. You need 3,000 ducats. That's very good. And you need it for 3 months. That's very good. Bassanio says, for the which, as I told you, Antonio shall be bound. And for this borrowing, as I already told you earlier, Antonio will be the surety, or he will be the guarantor. So he will be bound. So, Shylock, Antonio shall become bound. Well, oh, so you want that Antonio should be the guarantor. Oh, that's very good. He is simply boring Bassanio by repeating whatever Bassanio is saying. So this becomes really humorous, you see, because he is always saying whatever Bassanio is saying, and then he's adding well. So, for this borrowing, you mean to say that Antonio shall be bound. Well, now Bassanio says, may you steed me, will you pleasure me, shall I know your answer? Now, if you will please excuse me for asking, what is your answer to that? I just want to know what you want to say. I have told you everything. I want 3,000 ducats. I want this money for 3 months. I am giving Antonio's surety for this borrowing. Now please give me your answer, whether you will give me the money or not. May I know your answer, please? Says Bassanio. Shylock says, 3,000 ducats for 3 months and Antonio bound. See how he is. 3,000 ducats for 3 months and Antonio bound. Okay, so you want 3,000 ducats and you want it for a period of 3 months, and for that Antonio will be bound. Bassanio, your answer to that. If you could please give me your answer to that. Shylock, Antonio is a good man. Antonio is a good man. Is this supposed to be the answer? Antonio is a good man. What does it mean? Antonio is good enough to be the guarantor? Okay, so if he is good enough to be the guarantor, then are you giving me the money? Make it clear, Shylock. The reason why Shylock is talking like this is very simple. He is thinking. His mind is working. And so he's repeating the lines spoken by Bassanio. And that's the reason why he is not coming to the point, not directly saying that yes, he is ready to give the money. He is thinking. And so he says, Antonio is a good man. And Bassanio says, have you heard any imputation in the contrary? With regard to Antonio, have you heard anything negative? Anything that opposes the idea that Antonio is a good man? Have you heard anything in the contrary? Something opposing the idea that he is a good man? Shylock. Oh, no, 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 no. My meaning in saying he is a good man is to have you understand me that he is sufficient. Oh, no, 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 no. I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about Antonio being bad or anything like that. What I meant to say is that Antonio as guarantor is sufficient enough. I think he is sufficient or appropriate to be your surety for this borrowing. That's what I meant to say by saying he's a good man. I meant to say that he's good enough. He's good enough to be the guarantor. That's what I meant to say. Yet, but there is a but. Yet, his means are in supposition. Problem is that Antonio's resources, his wealth, his means are right now in supposition. And what is supposition? Well, it depends on, or it is subject to the risks of business. It depends on whether he is able to do good business and make a big profit, or whether he suffers a loss. So his wealth is already invested in his business. This is something about which we have discussed already in Act 1, Scene 1. Antonio and his friends were talking about that. But even Shylock knows it. Now, if you want to do the money lending business, then you must know your customer first. Nowadays, even banks, they give KYC forms to their customers to fill up. If you go there to open an account, they will give you an account opening form, and then they will give you a KYC form. And what is that KYC? Know your customer. KYC. The bank wants to know who you are, what you are, everything about you. Only then will the bank deal with you. And, there have been cases in our country where people have borrowed money, and not just a small amount, but in millions, and then they have left the country. They have left the country, and the banks have suffered loss. So in the modern era too, this thing continues. And in those days also, Shylock had to be careful. Before lending out money, he had to know who is the guarantor, who is borrowing the money, and who will be standing the surety, because it's his money. He is giving to someone. That's his business. If there is no recovery of what he lends out, then he can never do money lending business. There has to be the recovery of the full amount along with some amount of interest. So that is why he says that Antonio is a good man, no doubt, but his business, right now his money, his resources, his wealth is all invested in his business, and everything depends on whether he is able to do good business or not. Suppose he stands surety, and suppose I give you the 3,000 ducats and you take the money, no problem, for 3 months, but after 3 months if you are not able to pay back, if Antonio does not have the cash to pay back, then what happens? So that is what I am thinking about, says Shylock. He hath an argosy bound to Tripolis, another to the Indies. I understand. Moreover, upon the Rialto, he hath a third at Mexico, a fourth for England, and other ventures he hath squandered abroad. Well, as far as I have gathered from the Rialto, Rialto is the Venetian stock market, the other name for the Venetian stock market. And in the thumbnail of this video, if you watch carefully, you will see there is this bridge, of Venice, which I have put in the thumbnail, observe closely, that is the Rialto Bridge. It's a very famous Rialto Bridge. You can also look it up in Google Images. Rialto Bridge, just you have to type in, just go to Google, open the site Google and type Rialto Bridge, Venice, and click search and look into the images. You will see the same bridge which I have put in the thumbnail. So Rialto is the Venetian stock exchange or the stock market, and all the merchants of Venice, different types of businessmen with all their goods and commodities, they gather there, they do their trade and business, their interactions take place in the Rialto. So Shylock says that, and Shylock also goes to the Rialto because many a times, as I told you, merchants need money and they borrow from Shylock because there were no banks in those times. So he says that I have gathered this information from the Rialto that one of Antonio's argosies means merchant ships. Argosies are merchant ships. Ships which carry goods and move from one port to another. So one of his ships has gone to Tripolis. Is bound for Tripolis. Tripolis is actually Tripoli on the Mediterranean coast of Africa. The meaning is explained alongside, the place is described alongside. You must always read these side notes as you read the text. So it is in the Mediterranean coast of Africa. It was a great channel of trade to Central Africa. A vivid impression of the worldwide trade of Venice and England. So one of his ships has gone to Tripoli. Another is bound for the Indies. Yet another ship has gone towards the Indies. Now here Indies can mean India. Alternatively, it can also refer to West Indies, but in those times, Indies generally referred to India. So one ship has gone to Africa, another gone to India, and then, as I have gathered upon the Rialto, moreover, he hath a third at Mexico. A third of his ships has gone to Mexico across the South Atlantic Ocean. It is bound for Mexico. And then a fourth for England. So it has gone up to the North Atlantic Ocean and it's gone towards England. And other ventures he hath squandered abroad. And not only these, he has many more ships. So here we get at least the record of 4 of Antonio's ships plus more. That means Antonio must have owned a fleet of ships, at least 8 to 10 ships. So he was the richest of all the merchants who did export-import business. So I have gathered this in the Venetian market. In the market, it is news that Antonio's ships have all left the port of Venice and are bound for different countries of the world, different continents in fact. And so I have this question in my mind, says Shylock. What does he go on to say? He says, but ships are but boards, sailors but men. There be land rats and water rats, water thieves and land thieves, I mean pirates. So ships are ultimately nothing but wooden boards. In those days, ships were not made of steel, they were made of wood. So ships are but nothing but wooden planks. Ships are but boards. And the sailors, ultimately, they are also human beings. They are also mortals, just like us. They are specially skilled or trained for controlling and maneuvering the ships. That's okay, but they are also human beings. And when wood is given shape and then made into a ship, it becomes a ship, but ultimately it is wood floating in water. So ships are but boards and sailors but men. And then when you have this voyage going on in the sea, I must remind you that just as there are animals on land, there are land rats. Here, rats alone does not refer to rats, but all types of land animals. Just as there are animals in land, so also there are creatures living in the oceans. So many a times a giant squid or an octopus could attack a ship, or a whale, or maybe a huge shark. Those ships of the olden times were not as big as the ocean liners of the modern era. They were much smaller, and so more vulnerable to all such dangers of the sea. So the sea also has its own share of animals. Just as there are land rats, there are also sea rats. Meaning to say, creatures living in the water. Water thieves and land thieves. And just as there are thieves on land who come and steal things from people's houses, similarly you have thieves in the water too. I mean pirates. Now you all know who pirates are. They are robbers who attack ships and, well, rob the ships. They have their own ships in which they come and they attack other ships, and they take away all the valuables and kill the people, and sometimes even burn down the ship altogether. So there are pirates. So when ships go out into the sea, one can never be certain as to what will happen with them. So long as they don't come back to Venice, everything is uncertain. And when everything is uncertain, Antonio's wealth, his means are also uncertain. There's a big question mark. So this is what is going on in my mind. And then there is the peril of waters, winds and rocks. And not only that, apart from creatures of the sea attacking the ships, apart from pirates attacking the ships, we must not forget the elements. There could be a terrible storm. There could be tidal waves. There could be some kind of natural calamity or disaster which would affect these ships. And then there are submerged rocks inside the water. In certain areas of the sea, there are submerged rocks just under the water surface. And if the captain of the ship is not an expert and does not have vast knowledge about the different parts of the ocean, then these ships can easily get destroyed by hitting those rocks. We have discussed some of these things in Act 1, Scene 1. So, I am worried whether I should give money with such a man as guarantor whose wealth is in supposition. So, the peril here, peril means risk. Winds and rocks. The man is notwithstanding sufficient. But then, as far as the man is concerned, well, undoubtedly, he is sufficient. Sufficient enough to be the guarantor. I have no issues with that. But the problem is, his financial status totally depends on his luck as of now. So, you said you want 3,000 ducats. I think I may take his bond. Well, I think I can possibly lend the amount by preparing a bond. Well, anyway, despite all these ifs and buts, all these doubts in my mind, I think I can go ahead with this contract and give you the money. Bassanio says, be assured you may. Please be assured. I give you this assurance that you may lend the amount and that your amount will not be wasted. It will come back to you after 3 months. So I give you this assurance that Antonio, with Antonio as the guarantor, you can rest assured that your money will not be suffering any kind of loss. Shylock: I will be assured I may, and that I may be assured I will bethink me. Yes, I would like to be assured that I may, that I should, I can, if I want, give this money. I really want to be assured about that. But then I have to think. I need to think. May I speak with Antonio? Well, even as I think it over, may I have a word with this Antonio? Can you call Mr. Antonio? So we come to the end of this page, move on to the next page. Page 38. Bassanio: if it please you to dine with us. Oh yes, why not? Of course you can meet Mr. Antonio if you are kind enough to accept my invitation for dinner. Please come over to my place for dinner tonight. And there, at the dinner table, we shall meet and we shall talk. I'll be there. Antonio will be there. So please come. So please be kind enough to have dinner with us. Now this will make Shylock agitated, because Shylock will never sit and have dinner with Christians. Why? Because Christians eat pork and Jews don't eat pork. They hate pork. So that is the reason why he will not accept this invitation initially, even though finally he will go. But then, as of now, let's see what he says. Whatever he says here is important for reference to the context type questions. So this speech of Shylock is very important. Yes, to smell pork, to eat of the habitation which your prophet the Nazarite conjured the devil into. Yes, you expect me to come for dinner and to smell pork. Even if I don't eat, at least the smell of pork will go into my nostrils. Because there at the dinner table, you guys, you Christians, you always eat pork. And so I'm sure that a dish of pork will be served. And even though I don't take it, the smell at least will go into my nose. So you expect me to go there and smell pork? No way, I'm not coming, says Shylock. And then he gives a biblical reference. Please see the reference given alongside. I am zooming in. To eat of the habitation which your prophet the Nazarite conjured the devil into. Prophet the Nazarite here refers to Jesus. Jesus, the story of the Holy Bible, is being cited here by Shylock. Let's read. First of all, pork is meat forbidden to the Jews. Habitation means pig's body, dwelling place of the devil, according to Shylock. And then the meaning of that line, 34 to 36. Jesus Christ, who is being referred to here as the Nazarite, because Jesus was, during his lifetime, though he was born in Bethlehem, he went around and he even went to Nazareth. So Nazareth is being indicated when he is being referred to as the Nazarite. So in Nazareth, Jesus had healed a madman by ordering the devils that possessed him to leave the man and enter into a herd of pigs. So this incident or this story of the Bible is to be found in the book of Saint Mark's, chapter 5, verse 1 to 13. So once again, if you are wondering what that means, 5 is to 1-13, well, it means Saint Mark's, the book of Saint Mark's, which is part of Holy Bible, chapter 5 and verses 1 to 13. So he says that I am not going because Jesus had once asked a madman possessed by devils. Well, he had asked the devils to leave the body of the madman. In those times, in Shakespeare's time actually, you must be wondering why this concept of madman and devil comes here. The thing is simple, that in Shakespeare's time it was believed, and also during the time of perhaps when Jesus was around, it was believed that madness is a disease caused by devils. Now, who are the devils? The devils are the agents of Satan, the god of the underworld, and they are always around us, tempting us with many temptations of life, and sometimes they create mischief by getting into the body of human beings and turning them completely mad. So this is what was believed in those times. Whether it is true or not is a different question. What medical science says is a different question. But here, for the sake of understanding the Merchant of Venice, we must accept it and we must write it if it comes in our exam. So he says, that's why I said that this is an important extract or an important speech which can come as reference to the context type question. So it was believed that madness was caused by devils getting inside the human body. And that's the reason why this story of the Bible is also something like this. So Jesus had once come across this madman, and he had ordered the devils to leave the body of the man and get inside the bodies of a herd of pigs. This was Jesus who had instructed the devils to do something like this, and the devils had no choice because Jesus was a prophet, a holy man, a son of God, and so the devils had to leave the body of the man and had to get inside a herd of pigs. And ever since then, the man became cured, and the Christians, or rather the Jews in particular, they stopped eating pork because they believed that pork contains the presence of the devil inside, and that's the reason why they don't eat, and that's the reason why he talks about smelling pork with so much of disgust. He says, I will buy with you, sell with you, talk with you, walk with you, and so following, but I will not eat with you, drink with you, nor pray with you. What news on the Rialto? Who is he comes here? So he says, I am ready to buy and sell with you. That means do business with you, buying things or sell things to you. When you are a Christian, I am a Jew, no problem. I'll buy things from you, I'll sell things to you. That's okay with me. I am ready to talk with you like I am doing right now. I don't have any problem in that either. I am ready to walk with you. I don't mind walking side by side with you. And so following all these normal things, of course, I don't have any problem. But I will never eat with you, because what you eat, I don't eat. I'm not supposed to eat. I cannot even tolerate the smell of it. And I will never drink with you, because eating and drinking go together in those countries. And then he says, I will not pray with you, because your faith is different, mine is different. You go to the church, I go to the synagogue. The Jews went to synagogues for their prayers. So the Jewish place of worship was known as synagogue. So we'll come across the synagogue, the reference of the synagogue later in the play also, no problem. But as of now, this is what Shylock says. And then he says, what news on the Rialto? So what's the news from the market? Who is he comes here? Who is it coming this way? I think I can see somebody approaching. Who is it? Enter Antonio. So we'll stop here for the day.